Let's talk about DRY principle, which stands for do not repeat yourself. I have a code snippet here, and you can see I'm basically declaring and initializing an array, then I'm initializing another array with the length of the previous one. Then I'm actually looping through the formatted lines, which is the array that I just created from the previous one. And all I'm doing is simply going through each index of the newly created array, and I am formatting the new input based on the array that I created it from, right? Based on the previous array's length. And basically this formatted lines at the end is going to have these dashes around first line and then these dashes around the first line as well. Same thing is going to happen with the second line, and same thing is going to happen with the third line. In other words, it's formatting the lines. Very, very simple. Also, this is another case in which we can't really use for each in order to go through from the beginning to the end of the array, because we actually need the index. So this is one of the cases where we need the not the index, but the variable that we use for the index, right? Because we are looping through formatted lines, but we actually want to grab the index of lines. And so we need this variable I. So we're doing that, and then we're writing this formatted lines, so it's an array of strings to a file. Then we're going and doing the same thing. We're initializing and declaring and initializing another array with other information, doing the same type of thing, and then looping through the other formatted lines and then writing it into another file. Now here is a good question. Do you see something wrong with this code? Of course. A lot of things are repeating. Now this is a very simple and naive example. However, if you start working in the real world and start dealing with real applications, more often than not, you will come around stuff like this. And it is just that some of the code has been written from previous times, or people didn't have time to go and clean it up, but it is very good practice to go ahead and clean up stuff like this, because it clutters up your code, and it actually violates the do not repeat yourself principle. Now, why is it bad repeating yourself in code? Some of the reasons are that if you're repeating the code, then there are more places that you need to change the code. So let's say this logic, formatting logic, has changed to, all stars. Let's do it like that. Now, if I had this repeating in other files, maybe in multiple other files, then I would have to go find those other files, and I would have to change those into stars as well. That is if, the business requirements are that if you're formatting the file, it always has to have stars now instead of dashes. Now you have to go everywhere and find them. But wouldn't it be nicer if it was centralized in one place? So if you had to change it, you would only have to change it in one place, right? So this is why do not repeating yourself is a good principle to follow. Also, it keeps your application more maintainable. Once again, why? Because there's only one place where you have to go to change it. Let's go ahead and refactor this code. Refactoring simply means that you're changing the structure of your code, but not changing the functionality of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a method. I will say static, and then I will actually return a string array, and I will say format lines. And I will pass in one argument, and that will be unformatted lines. Great. Now within that, I will actually reuse some of this code. I will grab this. I will say formatted lines. Great. Use the length of the unformatted lines and go through the formatted lines and then do that. And at the end, simply return formatted lines. So now what we can do is we can replace this here. And we can simply say, just pass in the lines and it'll give you formatted lines. Same thing we can do right here. and passing the other lines into it. See? Much, much cleaner. So we can actually do this. We can actually skip the declaration of the array and simply come right here. Get rid of that. And take this. And that's it. So even less lines. And it's actually still pretty readable. And the beautiful thing is that now if the requirements change and they say, hey, instead of stars, now you have to have percentage signs. And let's change that the other side as well. And here we go. Only in one place. And before, if we started to have more and more of this logic all over the place in different files, then we would have to change it in that many places. So you see the beauty of the do not repeat yourself principle. So follow it. It will help you build cleaner and much more maintainable software.